Friends and colleagues, welcome to this premiere showing of Bridge of Spies. My name is Anthony Robert Palermo. I am of counsel at the law firm of Woods, Oviatt, Gilman, LLP, Rochester, New York. Have any of you heard of that law firm? I'm delighted to have been associated with Woods, Oviatt, Gilman since January of 1999, and to call all of you colleagues and friends of colleagues, and to have worked on a wide variety of matters. And I feel particularly proud to be a member of the team in the practice of law that I have loved for close to 60 years. And the evening's performance is a movie that I have seen. I saw the first showing at 10 o'clock last Friday when the movie opened. I can assure you that you are going to enjoy it immensely. It's extraordinarily well done. Tom Hanks playing the role of court-assigned counsel Jim Donovan is superb. The man who plays the role of Abel is absolutely spectacular. I predict that both will be nominated for Academy Awards, and only one of them can win. And Steve Spielberg, of course, how can you say anything but good things about what he does? He has all the money and all the brains and all the support in the world, and he uses it very effectively. So I think you're going to enjoy the movie. That's not to say that I don't disagree with some of the things that he says or the manner in which he presents them. Because, as a matter of fact, I was personally involved in the apprehension, interrogation, grand jury presentation, and trial of Rudolph Ivanovich Abel, who is alleged to have been the highest-ranking KGB spy ever arrested and prosecuted in peacetime for a capital offense. A lot of you are going to wonder how a young lawyer, fresh out of Georgetown Law School, got assigned to a major case like this. Well, first of all, let me tell you, this program tonight and my remarks may get you CLE credit because I'm going to talk about law practice management for the United States Justice Department circa 1973. That's not to say it should be imitated or continued by Jim McElhaney in our law firm, because how in God's name would you ever use a first-year law student on a case of this magnitude? The other guy on the case who was involved as deeply as I and jointly with me in the interrogation of the man who ratted on Abel and the presentation to the grand jury and the argument of motions and the preparation of the trial and participation in the trial had been out of law school 1 year longer than I. He was from Fordham. So I can't really tell you exactly why Jim and I happened to end up on this case. The other two members of the team were William F. Tompkins, who was the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Internal Security Division. He had formerly been the United States Attorney for Newark and had been in the JAG Corps before that. Probably the best lawyer on the team was Kevin Maroney, who happened to head the appeals section of the Internal Security Division and essentially directed us in our activities and reported to us, and was generous enough to have relied upon us and our judgment and our background and experience to do the job that we were assigned to do. The movie is not about the prosecution. It's not about the trial. It's not about the Justice Department lawyers actually, except that they sort of lump together CIA, lawyers, government in one category, and a particular individual whom you'll identify when you see the movie is not really a likable person. So just let you know, that's not me. The movie does not really get into the background of who Rudolph Abel was. It does concentrate on Jim Donovan, who has written a superb book and was based on his personal activities as well as His diary, he kept the diary. I never had time to keep a diary. We were too busy doing what we had to do. But in any event, this is Jim's picture, and it's on the board here. And you can take a look at it later on. But that's Jim Donovan. This is the man who called himself Rudolph Ivanovich Abel. That's Tommy Tompkins. That's Tony Palermo. That's Jim Featherstone. This picture was taken in the federal court the day the indictment was announced. As you can see the columns up here, it's the old style federal facility, very much similar to the one that we knew for years in Rochester. As a matter of fact, I took this picture of the now City Hall, former post office federal court in Rochester last December, big Christmas tree, same type of columns. It's a beautiful facility. I had the pleasure of serving as Assistant U.S. Attorney in charge of the Rochester office. It was a one-person office, but I had the pleasure of trying about a dozen cases in a year's time before Judge Burke. It was a wonderful experience. This picture is of the actual courthouse where the trial took place. And it is a picture that I took in either October or November of 1957. So let's just talk a little bit about how Abel was apprehended. Jim Donovan's book suggests that the government had known about the existence of Abel for a very long time. The truth of the matter is, in 1973, a newsboy called Jim Bosarts was collecting for his newspapers, and he happened to get some change. I won't give you the long story about how it happened. And the change dropped, and one of the 5-cent pieces, a Jefferson nickel, opened up. And inside was a piece of soft film, microfiche. And on it were strings of numbers, 5 numbers, 10 rows deep, and 10 rows down. Eventually that got into the hands through Jim and the New York State, or the New York City detective, to the FBI and all of the intelligence agencies. And for 4 years, they didn't know what the hell this message was. They tried deciphering it, and our best efforts, it was not decipherable. Then came May of 1957, and this man, Rhino Heihanen, walked into the American embassy in Paris and said, "I've been a spy in the United States, and I'm on my way back to Moscow, and I don't think I'm going there for a vacation." So he told the story of how he had been trained extensively over many years in Russia and in Finland, had been given false identity, had come into the United States, and his boss was a man known by the name Mark. And he was able to describe Mark, and a portrait was made of him. He also told of how he operated, drop areas, hollowed out bolts, hollowed out facility pencils, all sorts of mechanisms of communicating in the most secretive way, which required great skills. And he also identified areas where he had been associated with Mark. And through that investigation, the FBI, and I say FBI because initially CIA had the jurisdiction over intelligence matters overseas. The FBI did not. As you know, they've now cooperated much more. They're working together. But then the information was passed on to the FBI, who investigated in the United States. And one story in particular that resonates with me was that a drop area that they had used to communicate on messages on microfilm and microdots and so forth was in Prospect Park, in Park Slope area of Brooklyn. And they went to the place where this man said he had used as a drop area, and it was, you know, 4th step down in a particular place, and they found that the area had been filled in. It had been redone. They checked the maintenance department, engineers of the city, and lo and behold, so they opened up the step that had been filled up, and what did they find? They found a message in a bolt, just an ordinary, like a nail, which if you looked at it closely opened up, and then inside of it, soft film, and inside of that, a typewritten message. There were a number of things. They also found in the home of this man in Peekskill, New York, a hollowed out coin. And they said, whoa, wait a minute here. And so this guy said, you know, what we did is we had soft film, put it inside of a coin, and secret ways of opening up the coin was basically with a needle, putting into a particular dot that had been drilled into it, open it up, and there's your chamber for your soft message. So they said, my God. And then this guy gives him a special code, only given to him while he was in Moscow. And the Russian language has a lot of characters. I don't know if it's 250 or 350 or whatever, but it's extraordinarily complicated. Well, using this man's own personal code, they were able to crack this message, which basically was addressed to him, was intended for him, and gave him instructions on what he should do, where he should go, how much he should spend, what he should expect, etc. So very quickly, we knew that we had a spy on the loose in the United States named Mark. They surveyed and surveilled all of the areas where this man said he had been, and lo and behold, they discovered that across the street from this courthouse, in a building on the 5th floor, was a studio where a man named Emil Goldfuss had an art studio. They put that place under surveillance, and in 3 weeks' time, about 10 o'clock at night, they see a light go on and a man inside with a straw hat and a white band. They followed that man after he left, about midnight I think it was, into the subways and into New York City, and guess what? They lost him. So my God, you can imagine what was going on in Washington, D.C., the end of May of 1957 and the early part of June. The agents on that job probably had a tough time talking to J. Edgar. Well, they kept the place under surveillance, and to their good fortune, along about the June 13 to 18, the lights went on again. Same hat, same band. This time, they trailed him all the way to New York City and the Hotel Latham. And the rest is history. The arrest that you'll see portrayed in this movie took place. It isn't as it was in the movie. Basically, this man was found bare. He didn't have any air conditioning, so he was naked on the bed when they came in at 7 o'clock in the morning of the day he was arrested, and he wasn't in the bathroom, as you'll see in the movie. And they have some other things in there that aren't really accurate. I think they even throw the nickel into that room, and that isn't how it happened. But in any event, he was then taken by immigration and naturalization 2,000 miles away to McAllen, Texas, while the investigation continued. And that's about when Jim Featherstone and Tony Palermo got sent to New York City. I had some grand jury experience successfully in my first 6 months with the department, so I guess they had some confidence in me, but they merely said to me, we got a little matter up in New York to go for a couple of days, so I took 2 shirts and a toothbrush and a suit, and I was there for the next 6 months. And as it happened, the biggest issues in the case weren't the facts. The facts were all against the accused. Donovan had a very tough case because the corroboration of this witness was enormous. Jim tried to show that he was a liar. Well, aren't all spies liars? You have to be a liar, especially if you're a covert person who snuck into the United States and false identity, etc., and so forth. So proving that this witness is a liar doesn't really do you an awful lot of good. But he had his problems. He had his alcohol problems. He had his problems when we were talking to him. Indeed, we couldn't get him to testify in the grand jury. He said, I refused to testify. He knew he was a dead man. And ultimately, we said to him, we can give you a plane ticket, one-way ticket to Moscow. If you want that, we can do that. Eventually, he did testify, but he said he wouldn't testify at the trial. And so everything was on a very rush basis. And ultimately, he was indicted and brought back. Now, what I'd like to point out to you is, so that you can get your credit for CLE, I have some of the original materials here. As a matter of fact, I've got a copy of the indictment. And Abel, when he appeared before Judge Abruzzo, didn't have counsel. He went through a large dialogue on can you get counsel? The judge read him his rights. It's a capital case. You've got the right to a lawyer. If you don't have funds, we can provide you with a lawyer. The government said he was arrested and we confiscated money. He can use that money to buy a lawyer. His original request was for a lawyer named John Apt. John Apt happened to represent the Communist Party in the United States. But he said he had contacted Apt, and Apt was too busy with other matters, so he couldn't do it. So he said to Judge Abruzzo, can you make suggestions? And he said, well, if you want me to, I will appoint counsel. And interestingly enough, Abel said, would you ask the Bar Association to appoint counsel? And the judge said, I can appoint two counsel. The statute in a capital case allows me to give you two lawyers. And Abel said to the judge, is one better than two? And the judge said, not if you have a good one. The first one, you only need one. So the judge said, I will ask the Bar Association at your request for the name of one lawyer with an alternate in case that lawyer doesn't wish to serve or is unable to serve. And you know the rest of the story, and you'll see it tonight. Jim Donovan was that lawyer. And he, I think, did as good a job as you could do with the case that he had. The thing where I think you can get credit for here, many of you are probably not old enough to remember that we had carbon paper. You remember? And basically, you had to be a damn good typist for those of you who do any typing. You make a mistake and boy, you got a lot of copies to correct. Well, I happen to have an original copy of my papers in opposition to the motion to suppress and return of property, suppress the evidence, right here. My own personal copy of it. And it's carbon paper and it looks pretty good. I had a pretty good typist there. We actually used the staff of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District. I think we're probably closing in, and I won't go too much farther. I think the thing I'm most proud of is that Spielberg does give credit to Hanks and Donovan for their professional responsibility in defending an accused with whom they don't agree. And you will see that carried an awful lot of baggage with it for the Donovan family and for Jim Donovan. So I'm pleased and proud to be a member of a profession that does this, and we do it regularly. We now have public defenders, and we have a lot of other things. We didn't have that in 1957. And I think Spielberg does an excellent job in sequencing these things and mixing them up so that they tell stories with pictures. Just as this tells stories a lot easier than a lot of words, his movie does that. It's very colorful, and I think you will definitely enjoy it. I could probably, as my assistant Julie Neville knows, I can go on talking about this case, and I have talked about it. I've talked in a lot of smaller groups. This is the largest group that I've ever addressed on the topic, but I can go at great length on it because the stories within the stories here are absolutely incredible, much more so than the fictional version and that aspect of the case that you are going to see now, which is extraordinarily important in the history of America, the exchange of Abel for powers and the Cold War that we lived in then. The issues that we derived from that to now have accentuated enormously. They're as relevant today and more so than they were back in the 50s. So I'm delighted that Wood-Soviet-Gilman Management Committee has agreed to sponsor this. I'm grateful to the Great Place to Work Committee for inviting me to participate in it. And I can assure you from my experience, Woods Oviatt Gilman is a great place to work.